Hey, good afternoon there, friends and family from Ask a Christian. Today I have a guest all the way from Australia. I'm so thankful for modern technology. And we're going to go straight into it. I'm going to have her introduce herself, a little bit about her family, and her background. Please say hello, all of you online and watching, to Terri. Hi there, Terri. How are you?
Yeah, good. Hi, Amy. How you going?
I'm
I'm
doing well.
Terry Gordon, and I'm from Australia. I live in Brisbane,
Mm.
and it's really nice to be here this morning. God bless you all for coming and listening to me.
Terri, tell me a little bit about your family, what you do for fun and for dollars.
And for dollars. Okay, so my family. I'm the oldest of 5 kids, and my dad was a psychologist, and at one stage he was also a politician. And mum was a nurse originally, and when Dad was in the Air Force earlier on in his life, they met, and so that's how they got together. I was born in Singapore, interestingly. My father was in the Air Force up there, and came back as a child, so I don't really have a lot of memory of it. And it was really lovely. I went back there with my mum a few years ago, and she wanted to show me where I was born and what it was like, and it was really good because she shared memories I'd never heard of about the
Wow,
early part of my life, which was wonderful.
that's so cool.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and so have you done more traveling for fun? Is that something that you get a big kick out of?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Love, love, love travel. Yeah, yeah. So I've been to Thailand. Last time I went up to Thailand, I went up to northern Thailand, so
Mm,
right up the top. And that had always been my dream to go up there. And I've been to Paris a couple of times. It was beautiful.
wow.
And went up to the Australian War Memorial up north of Paris, which was wonderful.
Mm,
Beautiful, beautiful, incredibly moving place,
mm.
and of course the French loved our input into the Second World War there. So it was an extraordinary, beautiful experience. And then I went to England and did all the England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales trip. So yeah, been around a little bit. It's been wonderful. So much. So would like to do more.
Wow, that's awesome. How do you fill your time these days from
Well,
day to day?
COVID.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's really interesting times we're living in. I actually I work as a specimen collector in pathology,
Mm.
and so that's what I do for a living. And lately, I've been doing the testing, the corona testing.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah.
So extra prayers your way. Do you feel at risk, or do you feel pretty comfortable with all the?
Yeah, well, you're conscious of it because we've got to wear PPE. We've got to wear PPE,
Mm-hmm.
and so you're conscious, with the masks and the all the gown and the gloves all the time, and so you're conscious of the risk all the time, and
Mm-hmm.
then you're dealing with the second layer of that, and that's the people who are frightened and they're scared and they're worried, and so you're conscious of that as well.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to get in a little bit to your story,
Mm.
starting off kind of as a young person. By the way, did you grow up in the Brisbane area?
No, Sydney.
Oh, you grew
Sydney.
up in
Well,
Sydney.
I lived in a few places.
Mm-hmm.
I lived in the Blue Mountains for a little while.
Oh,
I
those are
don't know if you know
gorgeous.
much of Australia, but the Blue Mountains is a particularly beautiful place.
I know,
And then I
I
lived
know
in
everything except WA. I didn't make it that far, but all the way to Coober Pedy and Uluru and north of it.
wow, okay, that's really inland. Yeah, that's a bit further inland than where I was.
Mm,
So it's about 40 minutes to an hour out of Sydney west.
mm,
Yeah, so up into the mountains. Yeah, so I lived up there, and then I lived in northern New South Wales for a little
mm.
while, and then came back to Sydney and did my teenage wild years down in Sydney.
Yeah, I've got a
Yeah.
soft place in my heart for New South Wales. Just
Yes.
got some friends there now. So in your growing up all around,
Mm.
what was your concept of God and faith? And how did you relate to a higher power? Was that something that was a constant in your life from when you were young?
It was, funnily enough. Funnily enough, it was. I had an intuitive sense of God when I was, my
Mm.
earliest memories are just simply a really simple belief that God was there. And I don't know, I had a very religious grandmother. She was a, you know, her and my grandfather, these are my mother's parents, were really staunch Catholics.
Mm.
And, you know, my grandfather went to church every morning. And if you went into my grandmother's home, it was very much like, I don't know if you've seen those places, you know, with the statues and the pictures, and it was a
Yeah.
very Catholic place, but they were less religious and more spiritual. They were
Mm.
beautiful
Mm.
people, and kind and loving to us. And I don't know whether I got my early faith from that. I don't know, but I just simply remember having a faith as a kid. And I remember just totally believing that if you ask God for something to help you or look after you, that he was just going to do it. There was no question about it.
Mm.
So that was lovely. But, you know, later on, of course, that got changed very, very, very much. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
take me into kind of your growing up years, and addiction is part of your story and your background. How did you go from this sweet child believing in God and all of this? What was the transition? How did you get into drugs and alcohol? What started you down that path?
Um, I've often wondered that question. I mean, I think that I truly believe to this day that you cannot, if you don't have that predisposition, some part of your nature that has a tendency towards, um, you know, using something to fulfill something that's missing in yourself. I honestly believe that you can't simply just become an alcoholic. It
Hmm.
just doesn't work like that. Um, And so I think that I definitely had that predisposition. My father was definitely an alcoholic. I can say that now, even though I don't think he ever conceded to that. But he had certainly had all the traits, and he certainly had all the behaviour. And then I believe
Hmm.
from the stories that I learned about his father was the same. And so I tend to think that there was a definite genetic predisposition. Both my sisters ended up having addiction problems, and so yeah, so there was a tendency there, and I was this hypersensitive child. I was this hyper anxious. Yeah, I was that kind of person. I was a smart little kid, but you know, I couldn't. I always wanted the attention, and then when the attention would come onto me, I would just totally fall apart. You know, I was that sort of. Yeah, and I just saw the world from a really backwards, different point of view. It was almost like I've heard somebody describe it as, you know, why didn't somebody give me the instruction book? Everybody else seemed to know what was going on and how
Hmm.
to operate and how to behave in certain situations, and I was completely a fish out of water,
Hmm.
especially when it came to my emotions. My emotions were just it was the tail ruling the dog, you know. I would act off emotions I didn't understand, and I would, yeah, I was very black and white in my thinking too. If there was something about you I didn't like, I just did not like you,
Hmm.
period. And yeah, very black and white in my thinking. You know, love and hate. You know, yeah. And being like that, I guess that you know, I was uncomfortable in my own skin. I did not integrate as a person at all, and
Hmm.
of course, so contrary to the popular belief that, you know, peer pressure wasn't like that at all. I went looking for those people who, you know, once I heard that there was such a thing as, you know, as drugs and all that sort of thing, I seriously went looking, and as a very, very young kid, you know, looking for something that was going to make me feel wonderful. And
Hmm.
you know, I suppose it didn't help that I saw members of my family, including my father and his family and all that sort of thing, you know, getting drunk, and it was always we were they were a big party house,
Mm-hmm.
and
A
the
lot of fun
family,
associated.
the extended family. Yeah, so it was associated with good times, happy music, loud,
Yeah.
fun. So I guess the association was there as well. That this was really going to make you feel good.
Yeah. Okay. So that was kind of my next question. And like, you've thought a lot about this. You've had a lot of thinking through this, especially as you've led other people to sobriety. What specific needs do you think it was filling for you? The reason I ask is because a lot of Christians I talk to who've never had a struggle in their life really don't understand that if your alternative is, this or that, that there actually are at least some short-term interest in drugs and alcohol because it's helping you medicate or helping you with personality issues or things like that. And it sounds like fun and attention
Yes.
and helping you control the turmoil inside were there for a short time.
I think for most people, and I think it really is a social lubricant, isn't it? And I mean I love to get together with normies, or whatever you want to call them. I love to
Yeah.
get together and talk to them when they've had a few drinks, because they loosen up. They open up, they loosen up, and so if you've got that capacity to be able to control it, I think that it's a different ball game. But when I talk to people like that, and I tell my story and what alcohol did for me, where it enabled me to be the person that I thought that I wanted to be, comfortable, at ease with myself,
Right.
able to do that, to just to be social, to be outside of myself. Because the problem with having an addictive type of personality is you're literally locked up in yourself, and it's almost like there's some sort of an invisible barrier, and that barrier, you're unable to actually emotionally connect. You can connect at an intellectual level from the neck up, but there is a disconnect, and that's really the difficulty. And for some reason or other, chemicals in my system makes that connect, and I come to and I'm okay, and I feel that sense of okay in myself. It's difficult to describe, but people have said, well, why couldn't you just have two and do that? Well, that's interesting, because there was no off switch. There was no off switch that said I've had enough. There was never enough. It's like, if this makes me feel good, then 10 is going to make me feel wonderful.
Right. How is it, since you've found sobriety, how is it that you've relearned some of those social things? Do you remember struggling through that?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, my early recovery is very messy, and I think I've never met a person who it's not messy. And the reason that it's really messy, or part of the reason that it's really messy, is because everything is new. And from the time an addict, picks up a chemical, what happens is emotionally you just stop growing. Um, and I'm not really. I suppose part of the reason is for that is that you stop growing simply because you then, for some reason or other, we become unaccountable, and we can live in a fantasy of what we think we're like, and how we think we cope, and who we think other people want us to be. I think that's part of the problem. I could be a real chameleon. I could be over here one type of person, and over here another type of person. And I remember throughout my using days, I became a biker's chick for a while, and then a surfy chick for a while, and I could just slip and slide through whatever it was I thought they wanted me to be. I could be that, until the novelty wore off, and I'd move on to the next, who's reinvent myself, because that hadn't worked. And so I would reinvent myself, and I would just simply become another Terri, another version of Terri. And I really never ever knew who the hell I was. I just did not know who was Terri.
Yeah. Oh, let's get back to that a little bit later. Terri, can you tell me a story? I never want to glorify
No.
usage or anything like that, but I do want to give people who are watching a sense of who you were, and that kind of led into it, the changing, the different Terris. But can you give me a story that would kind of sum up or envelop how your life was being run by the chemicals?
Well, I left home when I was barely 16, and I got in a flat with my sister eventually when she was. I moved in with a couple of guys first of all, and that was just absolute chaos and disaster. And so I got this flat with my sister when she's a year younger than me, so it was a year later, and I got this flat with my sister. And the reason that we chose it was on top of a real estate in Sydney, and we chose it because it had a view, and the view was this long alleyway that led into these, staircase that came up into the flat. And the reason that was important was because by that stage, I was starting to be, I came under the radar of the police, if you like. I'd dropped one boyfriend to go with another boyfriend, and the first boyfriend got very angry about that, and decided that it would be an interesting thing to do to put us into the police. And so not a very nice guy. And so after that time, I came under the radar of the police, and so of course, so from then on in, it was a dark kind of trying to stay ahead of them, if you know what I mean. And so the thing is, chose this flat, had a view. The view was the alleyway, which meant you could see somebody coming from a very long distance away through the window.
And so that was the plan.
Some people choose views for all sorts of reasons, but that was my choice. And anyway, so I'm living in this flat with my sister, and look, it was just a dive. I remember we had 2 mattresses, a frying pan, and we lived on takeaway pizza. And I was so sick with the drugs at that stage and the booze. I couldn't. I used to have I was addicted to heroin by then. By the time I was 16, I was already addicted to heroin. So I used to have a syringe ready with my little implements, my little spoon, my little everything that I needed, all my tools, so that just to get out of bed, I would have to take something at that stage. So it was a terrible way for a young girl to be living in, and both of us were in that boat at that time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. I heard a snippet of a speech that you did for another group, and you talk about a time when the legal system did catch up with you finally, something that you did. Not only were you on their radar, but you got in front of them, and they told you needed to go through a rehab program, which included a 12-step program. And during that speech, you said, "You're not clapping me, you're clapping God, because it's by his grace that you decided to stay in the program." Yes. Can you take me to the day when you were thinking, I don't like this, I'm in or out? Take me to that day, that moment, and what you were thinking when you thought, okay, I'll try it.
Right. There was probably 3 times that I had a real, I think it was a collapse of my ego and a real desperate desire. And, not everybody gets that. And I know that that's just a God-given thing. And if there's a crack there, I know God will move in very, very, very quickly. All he needs is just an invitation. It's really that simple. I believe up until that point of my life, when there came that moment of absolute desperation, that God had just put me in the too hard basket. There'd be times when I tried to pray, and of course it was always, can you get me out of this? The cops were on my back, my parents were on my back. They were frightened about what was happening to me and my sisters. And so what happened was I had moved back home because I had a court case pending. I always had these court cases pending that I have to front up to. And so I pull myself together for a little while so I would make a good impression, And I remember one night, so I'm living at home. So I went out as usual, on the hustle. And I went and I gave a girl some money, and she never came back. And I stayed there just waiting on this street corner of the night. And I waited overnight. She didn't come back, and I was just crestfallen, and I was starting to get sick because by this stage I was absolutely physically addicted. And so the thing is, she didn't come back. I decided, well, I just better go home. I better start. I knew I'd have to look after myself because I was going to go through yet another withdrawal.
Mm-hmm.
And I came down this back alleyway, and there was an abandoned car. And as I got closer to the car, there was a little bit of a street lamp over the top of the car. And I looked in this car, and there was two guys in there. One was slumped over the steering wheel and obviously drunk. I could smell the booze coming out of this car. And the guy in the back of the car, interestingly enough, was lying face down, and he had a wad of money in his back pocket. Now, I was a thief. I was a little thief. It wasn't nailed down. You know, it was mine. That's it.
Yeah. Opportunity.
Yeah, opportunity right there in front of me. You know, so I the windows were down in this car. So this is the scenario, and so that's the scenario. So it would have been nothing for me to just put my hand through this window and just steal this wad of money that I could see in this wallet in the back of his pocket. And I don't know what happened. I had this moment of clarity, and I just saw my life for what it was. I saw the rat wheel that I was on. And I remember thinking to myself, and I thought it through. Okay, so I steal this guy's money. I go find some other girl or some other guy. They either rip the money off, and I could see myself being back there the next night on the rat wheel doing the same thing. Yeah. And I just had this inner, I can't do it. I'm tired. I can't do it anymore, you know. And it was almost like I had a collapse on the inside. Everything I had tried to do was not working, and I knew it right at that point. And so I crawled back to my parents' place, crawled up through the hallway, got myself into bed. By this time, the perspiration's running off me. I'm hot. I'm going into the clammy cold sweats. And I lay on that bed, and I remember my prayer to God was, you know, God, just help me or let me die. I just can't. I'm done. And I thought I heard, in my heart of hearts, I thought I heard a voice that said to me, thy will be done. And I knew, I had this sense that section of my life was finished. And I just knew it, and I slept peacefully that night. I woke up the next morning and nothing had changed, so I thought. And I went out on the hustle, and everything just was like a dream. And I don't know how long that went on for, because I was really in a strange mental place at that point in my life. So I can't quite recall that time, you know. But I remember within about 3 months, I found myself in a rehab program. So, and I'm sure that it was through that, you know, it was because of that prayer. So I was led. Yeah.
Because that happened, when the rehab program came along, your heart was open to giving it a try.
I believe so. I mean, I resisted and I resisted and I resisted. I wanted that easier, softer way. You know, I wanted it to be. My idea was, this is how crazy I was. My idea was, oh, okay, so you go into rehab, and then you learn how to use drugs and alcohol responsibly. You know, like I seriously thought that only I could use heroin on the weekends, drink socially, behave myself, you know, go out on dates and come home in one piece, all would be well with the world, you know. And the police, if only the police would just get off my back. I was so silly that I just, they're really picking on me. Like, out of all the people, you know, what the hell was I doing to hurt anybody else? You know? And yeah, it was just crazy thinking. It's
nice, though, because if you had thought that you would give up everything all the time, you probably would have not have wanted to give it a try.
Oh, exactly. If I had known that, yeah. I mean, I couldn't believe that they in the rehab actually expected me to give up smoking dope. I couldn't even for a second understand what was wrong with that, because, you know, my attitude towards that was it never gave me any problems except the fact that it was illegal, and that was their silly fault. You know?
Absolutely. Might as well take it to get it made legal, right? Yeah.
Yeah. That was the problem. It wasn't that it was doing anything that was wrong. It was just that it was illegal. Yeah.
Wow. So this was many years ago. When did you find sobriety?
In 1978. So 42 years ago.
Yeah. So compare these mindsets that you're telling me about, where you were very focused and needed drugs to get through the day. your life, your relationships, your finances. You were young, of course, but
Yeah.
and then fast forward, compare that mindset that you have then with how your relationships, your finances, you said when you become an addict, you stop growing emotionally. So what's happened to you in your adulthood? What
Wow.
Give me some before and afters.
Before and afters. Okay. So before, as I've described, so my thinking was very much, if I had a problem, then somehow or other you needed to change, or the world needed to change, to accommodate my way of looking at it. I think what the rehab program that I went into was very much focused on the 12 steps of sobriety. So that was, admitting that you had a problem, fight and accepting that you were powerless in yourself to overcome that problem. It was bigger than you, bigger than your capacity and your own willpower to resolve. And so that's the first step of recovery. And what flows on through that is, okay, if I'm powerless, then I need a power, and that power has to be something outside of myself. Most, if not all, well, no, that's not true. Most 12-step programs are very, they put a sort of a loose boundaries around that, and it's to be all inclusive. And so the thing was that the idea is to find some sort of a power to believe in outside of yourself. Now, by that stage, I had lost any faith in God. And so I think what I did was I simply transferred a need for something that was greater than me initially to the people who were around me in that program, who could make sane decisions. I had an inkling that I was mad, but I wasn't quite sure. And so I remember in the rehab one time sitting next to this girl, and we had this interesting discussion as two little nuts. She said to me, I think we might be crazy. And I said, no, I don't think so. And she said, oh, no, we're not crazy. We know we're crazy. Crazy people don't know they're crazy. How beautiful was that?
Well,
but yeah, so that was in the thinking side of things. But in the emotional side of things, that's been a long road, Amy. It's been a long road. Reason being is because, of this incredible disconnect. This disconnect between, I could operate intellectually, but there was no connection between I guess as having a terribly, terribly sensitive nature. And I'd been terribly hurt by the time I got sober. I'd been really used and abused and pulled from pillar to post. And I got in every relationship that I had, particularly with men, were based on this sick relationship that I had with an alcoholic father. And as a female, I can tell you I've had to do a lot of work in that area to come to terms with the fact that I don't need a guy to validate me. I don't need to go looking for men to make me feel as if I'm okay as a female. And so my relationships were based on that type of thing. And the problem with that, of course, is that, my radar is always going to pick the sick one. It's always going to pick the person who is going to, have problems themselves, is going to, have a relationship with me that's completely codependent and sick. And there's going to be a need-based thing, a need-based motivation, and that's no reason to have a relation. It's very, very unhealthy, and of course, all my relationships are unhealthy. And so, that's been another area that's really had to change, and I'm pleased to report I'm getting there. After 42 years, I'm getting there.
yeah. I mean, if relationships can bring the greatest joy in our lives, they can also bring a whole lot of suffering, and so I can see how, that could be an interview all by itself, right? The process that you've gone through to.
It's a huge, huge thing. And if it's the old story, though, if you have no relationship with yourself, how on earth can you have some? Because, like I said, I could bring the chameleon into the relationship. So, what do you want me to be? Oh, you want me to be a nice little girl who keeps her mouth shut and does what she's told and blah, blah, blah. And, of course, that's going to attract, the type that needs a really submissive type, until I decide, well, I don't want to be that submissive.
Until it's not actually you anymore.
So I become somebody else. It's strange.
Yeah, I think, it's when I hear you say that, that's not that much different than how most girls run their lives growing up anyway. We're always, looking for the validation, which I believe started in the Garden of Eden when the guilt and shame came upon Adam and Eve for the first time, and Eve finds herself, naked, and they're blaming each other. And the Bible has some words to say about that. So that's kind of my personal belief on where it started, and why girls are looking to the men in their lives to give them their identity instead of God. But it sounds like maybe just a little bit exacerbated.
Well, I guess as I explained, the drugs did something to pull me together, and so that I could be some sort of a personality, even if it was a false one. But the thing is that I guess what's happened with the 12-step program is that has become the glue in my life. It's become the glue because I have a set of principles to guide me, and this is where sort of the Christian way of life has had an enormous attraction for me, because there are clear-cut principles, and I became attracted to that because I need that in my lifetime, because my boundaries prior to getting sober, my boundaries were wide and varied, and my principles were of the type that said, well, you don't like these principles? Well, hey, I got a whole new set, and I just make a whole new set. Now I believe in this.
Sure. Just
very quicksandish, very slippery sand. We'll just move the boundaries over here, But goalposts,
just for a second here, pause. Let you know Sandra Enterman and Justin Whittings tell you hi. Guillermo Martinez and Madai Lopez. And Justin wants to know what your favorite Kanye song is.
Who's Kanye?
Okay, that's how you're gonna play. All right. Well, Justin, you heard it. If he doesn't know who Kanye is.
I've heard the name because it's got an interesting spelling. That's honestly, I'm not kidding. That is true. I don't know.
Okay. That wasn't a joke. All right. Well, try again, friends. If you're watching, listening, tuning in, we thank you for your time. We know that there's so many things you could be watching, so many people you could be hanging out with. So thanks for choosing us. Go ahead and put in any comments or questions you have for Terri. I'm going to ask her a couple more, and then we'll check and see what you have to say. Thank you, Sanj. Sanj says, woohoo, love you girls. All right, Terri, I am particularly interested, as you can probably tell, because this channel is Ask a Christian. I'm interested in Christ, and I'm interested in finding overlap between things that work, different tools. And as we were talking about kind of before we went live, I picked up a guidebook that I know you've read and that you've enjoyed, and I want to read an excerpt. It's talking about alcoholism here, but I want to read this just so that folks at home can hear the power of this language. It says, our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have, so this would be Terri, you talking to people that you've gone after to help them have the same sort of enlightenment and willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. Here's where it got real serious for me. At some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us had tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it's too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. So I read that in kind of researching what your journey must have been like. And that hit me so hard because I have my own struggles, of course. And just replacing that word alcohol with the word sin. It's cunning, it's deceitful, in my own self, I think I can overcome it. I've tried softer ways, like you were talking about. Maybe I can just manage sin. Maybe I
Yeah.
can just, use it normally.
Yes.
But I want to know how that has applied to you in your faith walk and other things that have come up in your life. If this has been a guide to you, how have you applied it to other areas?
Yeah. It's a beautiful read, that, because there's not a wasted word in it, and I truly believe, I remember researching to see what the author of that, and it was one of the co um, uh, starters of AA, and what he actually said was, he sat down to write to record what he talked about as his road into recovery. And he says an interesting thing. He said he sat and put pen to paper, and it was as if the pen moved itself.
Wow.
And I truly believe that those words were inspired, because they are way beyond what anybody he was only a few years sober then. And I can tell you, it takes at least 2 years in somebody's recovery to start to what people don't realize is that there is not only is there are physical repercussions to how much chemicals an addict can put into their system, but so the liver can be damaged, the kidney can be damaged,
Mm,
the body itself is damaged, but that also, the brain is a physical organ as well. And so what people don't realise is it takes at least 2 years for those things to start to come back. And so I think for him to be able to write something that was so precise, that implemented into the life of an addict and an alcoholic, that program that he's talking about in his writing, there is no way he would have had the nous to be able to do that. There is something really amazing where you can, since in the 80 odd years that AA and NA and these programs have been going, and the amount of lives that they've changed, there is
mhm.
more to it than just a few pieces of words on a page. So
Yeah.
something incredibly happened in that writing, and I think what it was that, yeah, that's right. We look for easier, softer ways.
Yeah.
Sin's the same. You don't. The funny thing about it is it's terribly progressive, and it's sort of like you put your toes in from there. Oh, that feels good, and then you
Mm,
put your whole foot in. Oh, that feels even better. Oh, then
yeah.
you put your leg in. Oh, let's put the other leg in. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
always this progressive. It just starts with whatever it starts with, be it a sin, be it an addiction, whatever, it starts with something. They talk about gateway drugs. They talk about, something in sin that does, that's very nice,
Yeah.
um, and a few more could do well. I always
Yeah.
remember a funny saying I had with a friend of mine, and the friend of mine says, if they came up with a cure for addiction and it was in a pill form, well, I'd want a few of them.
Yeah.
That's kind of
Uh,
how it is. Yeah, yeah, but I love the terminology in that, because it says, we
mhm.
beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. And what that meant for me, and what it means for the people that I work with, Amy, is that unless a person builds a solid foundation in the very beginning of their recovery, if they leave gaps in it, like, for example, a small reservation, well, yeah, I guess I could give up this, or I'm not going to give up smoking dope,
Mm,
which was my problem. Any reservation about it, and I think what that boils down to from a Christian point of view is that I don't think that God's all that interested in how you think about. The funny thing about 12-step programs is it doesn't matter whether you believe it. What matters is whether you do it or not.
mm,
And so the interesting thing about that, and I think it's very, very much the same in the Christian journey, I don't think God's all that interested too much in how you think about things. God's more interested in your heart. And so the whole idea with the 12-step programs is to give to that with all your heart. Throw your whole soul into it and shut the door behind you,
yeah.
because half measures avail us nothing. That's what it says further into that reading. And it's very true. And less than half measures avail us nothing. So in other words, if you still have a reservation about, you get nothing out of it all. It's sort of like somebody who just reads a tiny little wee part of the Bible and says, I don't get it. It's just another book. Unless you take on the whole thing, it doesn't work. And that's really what that reading's about. We beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. And that's what I had to become. Desperate enough to be fearless and thorough.
Yeah.
And build that foundation, you know.
That's good stuff. That definitely applies to all kinds of things in life. Appreciate that. I want to just ask a couple more questions. I see that we're going on 40 minutes now. But what do you think? I mean, some of these recovery programs are known for being so inclusive. People say that, you know, that is my church, or that is my, you know, those are my people. That's my group. It goes way beyond fighting addiction into friendship and community. What do you think that these recovery programs are doing well that the church could adopt, make their own? What are they doing well in supporting people that we could just kind of transfer over to a weekly worship type service?
Right. I think the thing about 12-step programs is that it's attractive to the type of people that get involved with them are people who are just ordinarily misfits. And so, of course, what brings them together is, you know, the difference. And so I'm very, very different, but I don't feel different because I'm with a group of other people who feel different. Therefore, it crosses that barrier, if you know what I like. And they also, a lot of the people talk about these programs as being their family. You have where that comes into play is that a lot of the people, again, in those programs are people who oftentimes come from very, very problematic family backgrounds. And so, of course, you know, they find a sense of family there. You know, they find the older people in the fellowships. You know, are there substitute parents at times? You know, there's motherly types and there's fatherly types who are protective towards them, and they'll find their brothers and sisters and all this sort of thing. And oftentimes, you know, I've never really managed to reunite with my family after all these years, and so I guess what I have found myself is, you know, I found the sisters, the brothers, that family thing, and so I think that there needs to be a recognition of that. But how that fits in with the church, I think that there's a couple of things that that 12-step programs do well. There's a big focus on testimony, an absolutely massive focus on testimony. And like that reading that you read out, Amy says, you know, our stories disclose in a general way what we were like, what happened, and what we are like now.
Yeah.
I've never been to a really good 12-step meeting where the people who spoke don't use that tiny little formula of what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And the beauty of that is, like, you can just say, oh yeah, well, that's my story, and, you know, big deal. But the beauty of that is that why that's such a wonderful thing is because what I was like talks about what I was like in sin. And what I'm like and what happened is where God stepped into the picture. And so whenever I'm listening to somebody's story, when they're using that formula, I can't wait to hear that part where they talk about what happened, because the what happened part is God showing up and God, okay, you know, you've said, you've called me here. You know, I was always there, but now you're recognizing that you need me in your life. This is what I'm going to do with your life. And then what it was, you know, what it's like now is it's the fruit. It's like this is, you know, this is what I'm going to mold into you and bring you into being for the person that I love and the person that I know. And I think that, you know, what the 12-step programs do well is the focus on testimony. And I think that I would love more of that, to hear more of that. And the other thing I think that they do well is sponsorship. I'll give you a quick little story. My my husband and I first joined a little local church here in Ipswich, and church people who grow up in the church don't understand that you guys have a language that is strange. It's
Mm,
strange to a person coming into it. We
preach.
didn't.
Yes.
I mean, it's a whole different language. Like you talk about salvation, you talk about what all the different things that the book of the Bible. I remember going along to a Bible study, and if Sandra's here, she might remember this. But they're saying, okay, so now we're going to go to the book of John 1, and we're going to go to this and all that. And I'm looking and looking and looking and looking and looking, and I said, my Bible is wrecked. I want another one because I haven't got the.
I don't
And
have
somebody,
this.
I don't have this one. I don't have what you guys are reading.
Yeah.
This is a dud book. It's missing parts. And what I didn't realise was that there was John 1, there was John 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So this is where sponsorship is a wonderful thing. You
Oh,
give.
yeah.
And the other thing too is that because the little school over there at Ipswich the church has a little school beside it. Every time they talked about this Sabbath school business, we thought they were talking about the church, and so
Mm.
about the school. And so for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, we just came to church, and they'd be talking about, oh yeah, and then there's Sabbath school,
Mm-hmm.
and to us it just meant nothing.
What? Yeah.
Yeah, so we
Yeah.
turn up to church at 11, but everybody had been to Sabbath school. Well, we're thinking they're taking their kids to school for special
Yeah.
Bible studies, you see?
Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
we don't keep in mind to like how inaccessible our language and our practices are because you're right. Many of us grew up in them and they're just
Yeah.
sort of second nature. But I've
Mm.
actually my awareness to that is extremely heightened. I'm dating somebody who hasn't grown up in my particular denomination. And, the language that we use, yeah, we forget that we're leaving people out just with words. So,
Yeah, yeah, simple. Well, it's all right, but yeah,
right.
yeah.
Thanks for
Mm,
highlighting that.
mm.
Just pausing here to read a couple more comments. Carrie Young says, hi from Carrie and Jonathan. Love the sunny smiles. Jay Guillermo Martinez says, this was a very important topic. More, please. And Sandra Enterman, good point, Terry. I remember you first coming to church. Joe Tyler, awesome. Yes, we need to know our condition. So, all right, with that, Terry, I want to ask you the last question. You've talked about where you were, you've talked about God intervening and leading. Where do you think he's leading you next? What lessons do you just have an inkling that he's going to be leading you through and teaching you in the next few years? Where are you headed?
Mm. I think I've come to a point in my life now where doing this type of thing I feel good about it now. For a long time, there was so much shame in my
Mhm.
past and sadness and the lost times, the relationships in my family that never really came back together again, and all that sort of thing. And I just thought the story was just. I suppose the focus was, in my mind anyway, it was how sad that was. But now I have a beautiful, beautiful life and beautiful friends in my life. And in spite of everything, I've survived so many different things, and I think that it's a great story. I have people in my life who want me to write this book, and who are really
Yes.
keen to hear my story and delight in it. And I think, why shouldn't I share that? And I think that
Mm.
that's where I'm heading, because it's already started. We're
Yeah.
putting together a meeting just after this, and what it is it's an Indigenous group, and I have a best friend who's an Aboriginal elder, and so we're putting together something to do along those lines. And my story will be part of that. Not that I have that sort of background, but he does, and so I'm helping him to get involved in that. And I think the thing is, what I love to do these days is I a little bit like what you do in some ways, in my own version of that, Amy. Hold people up and say, look what God has
Yeah.
done in their lives too. And
Awesome.
I think that's great. And I don't know. I want to be more involved with my church than I am.
Mm.
And I think maybe there's an avenue for me to do something along those lines as well. In the church. And Yeah, so we'll see. I don't know, but I know that doing this type of thing is probably where it seems to be heading, because I've because of COVID, and very, very interesting things happen with the 12-step programs around the world, and that is
Oh,
that
yeah.
they've really embraced Zoom, and there are Zoom meetings happening
Mm,
everywhere around the world right now, and I have just had the most fascinating, brilliant time attending 12-step meetings in Spain and Alaska and
oh, wow.
Catherine,
Oh,
and
wow.
it's been incredible. And so what's happened out of that is that I'm being asked, will you come and tell your story, Terri, at this meeting that meets, and I definitely think that's something that will morph into whatever it will after COVID,
Right.
but I see that being so embraced by the 12-step community. It's just been amazing. I talked to one of my all-time heroes only last week, and
Hmm.
I've been listening to this guy's audios for years,
Yeah.
years and years and years, and just loved his story. It's very funny. He's a brilliant guy. He's an attorney, and he's just brilliant. He's been a prosecutor down in Florida and for years and years and years.
Hmm.
And he has a very funny, wonderful, sad, all the rest of it drinking
Uh,
story. And I was
the
able
things
to
that make a
talk to
great
my
story.
hero. I was able to talk to my hero, and I just loved it. So and I've been able to sort of give a lot of encouragement to a lot of girls who are
Hmm.
starting out in their own journey of recovery through that medium, and I think that that's definitely where God is leading me, for sure, for sure.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
that's exciting. Hey, remember the little guys when you get there, okay?
No,
Well,
I'll step up to you, big guy's place.
I'm so grateful for your time. I just want to say to Rosemary Shaw, thank you for joining us. Joe Tyler says you're a jewel, Terri. Praise God for his grace. Blessings and hugs. We've had
Amen.
a great time today. I'd love to have you back another time. We could maybe get into
Yeah.
some relationship type stuff. But
Yeah.
those of you who are watching, thank you. Please share this with anyone. It's going to be a blessing too. Please like and subscribe. When you do that, you're helping us get our Christ-centered message out. Just the whole reason we're here, like Terri said, is to talk about God's people and his word. I want to do some of both testimonies and Bible studies, because in that way, we're just going to show a right picture of who God is. And that's my goal here at Ask a Christian. So please like, subscribe, and share. And Terri, I'm going to end this broadcast, but I'd love for you to stand by for just a minute and we'll catch up. But thank you, everybody. Thank you for watching. Sandra, you're welcome. I love you. I miss Australia. Maybe I can come
Yeah.
back and see you guys over there sometime soon. But that's all for now. And we'll see you next Tuesday for another live broadcast with Ask a Christian. Bye.